I had 45 days to build a larger-than-life Megatron costume. Did I say 45? I meant 25 days, and it is the hardest thing I've ever had to build or do to date. So let's talk about it. Okay, so before we get into the actual build, the computer programs, Armorsmith, printing, whatever, there's a couple things I need to cover. First off, this video isn't sponsored by anybody I'm gonna talk about. It's not sponsored by Transformers or Bambu or Nico or whatever. I'm making this video because I want to, and I wanna go over the build with you guys and share with you everything I learned. With that said, I need to personally thank Bambu Labs and Nico Industries for making this possible. Without them, this wouldn't have happened. And I'll get into why and how they came in clutch, but like, thank you guys. Now with that out of the way, I want to tell the story of how I actually got into making this costume. And if you aren't interested in the story part and you just want Armorsmith or printing or whatever, or the files, then skip to this timestamp. But I think this is really important because this story leading up to it is why I had to make the decisions I had to make, why I had to print it in raw silks, or why I decided to. So yeah, let's just get into it. There I was, August 30th. I don't know where I was, but I got an email requesting, among other things, for me to make a larger-than-life Transformers costume. For the premiere that was in LA and eventually got moved to New York. Thank God it got moved to New York because that meant I could drive. And they were requesting for me to make Bumblebee. Yes, that's right. Initially, I was slotted to make Bumblebee, and eventually that got passed off to somebody else, and that was interesting. But they asked if I could make Bumblebee, and after I knew this was a real email, because scam emails exist if you've made any type of content or videos, this was real, this was happening, and I had 45 days. Actually, after figuring out I was real, I had less than 45 days. So the race was on, and I knew I needed a couple things. I needed machines I could trust, that I didn't need to waste time calibrating, and that were gonna print beautifully, and I needed 3D files that were printable, and I didn't have time for back and forth. I didn't have time for bad files. I didn't have time to sort through them and tell the modeler, hey, fix this, do this. I needed them to work first time, period. So around August 3rd or 4th, I kicked Bambu Labs an email and I'm like, hey, this is a huge project. I need more firepower. I need more machines to pump this out. I gave them the pitch. They were like, sick, we'd love to help you with this and sponsor it. Not only are we gonna send you 3 new X1s and 3 new P1Ss, meaning I had 4 of each, we're also gonna give you the filament. So not only did they send me the printers, they sent me a buttload of filament for Bumblebee. Yeah, uh-oh. But at the time I was like, sick, that's out of the way. I have filament, I have printers. Now I need the 3D files. And this is probably the biggest downfall of me not 3D modeling myself. I'm at the whim and mercy of anybody I can get to do this. Less than 45 days to model an entire cosplay of a character that isn't even out yet, that's a big ask. So I went down my list and I was emailing every private modeler and every company I knew, and they all kept saying no because they just didn't have the time. And that's not their fault, that's mine. It's a rush project and well, I'm putting out unrealistic requests. And I was starting to panic, like it was day after day, and around August 12th, 13th, the printers were about to show up and I needed a model to print when those showed up. Nico popped up. I kicked Nico a message and we had been friends for a while and he's like, hey man, I got you. He put his entire modeling team on this program, and the idea was as he gets models done, he gets the shoulder done, send me that file. As I'm printing it, he's modeling the arm. Arm's done, send it, and it was piece by piece by piece, and I was gonna use Armorsmith to scale it all. I told him, hey, here's a good reference image of Megatron and his size, use this, scale it all to that, and I'll worry about the adjustments. But as long as all the parts match that photo, we're good. And it's around August 14th, I think, as I'm unboxing the printers, getting them set up in my print room, unboxing the filament, I get an email that's like, hey, could you do Megatron instead? Thanks. Bruh. Now this was a curveball, but it's just how things go and you have to be receptive to change. Again, it's no one's fault, but they said, hey, we want you to do Megatron. I needed more filament. And this meant I had to have Nico change what he was modeling for me, but luckily he hadn't actually started with Bumblebee. He was about to start, and then I got him reference images of Megatron. I overnighted some filament from Amazon because I just didn't have time for Bambu to send it to me. I loaded up on silvers because Megatron silver, and I actually found this really cool purple black silk that it looked like his legs. We were gonna go with this. And Bambu had sent me a bunch of gunmetal, and this actually ended up working out pretty nicely too. And when you look at these colors, that's Megatron. I like that. So the game was set. It was about August 14th, 15th. I got my first file to be printed from Nico August 16th, and it was the shoulder bicep part, and we were off to the races. So let's get into Armorsmith, the files, and looking at all of that. But that's the story, how we got here. And now I had 30 days to make this thing happen. Oh God, pray for me. So here we are in Armorsmith, and if you guys have never used Armorsmith, I'm not gonna go over it too much. There's a tutorial here in one of the corners. It shows you how to use it, how to scale it, what the purpose of it is. But you guys might already be wondering, Transformers costumes are kind of big. I was gonna need to be in stilts. So I hopped on Amazon and I ordered these really awesome drywall stilts. They're actually the same set that I think Kiera ended up using in Alita, and I don't know if Lankey used? Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they were really handy and I just needed to learn to walk on stilts. That was a whole other endeavor. But what's cool about Armorsmith is you can put in stilt height. I don't know why it says 335 inches. It was actually like 15 inches, and you can see that's how tall I was gonna need to be. Now, this avatar is roughly my shape and size, so I started dragging and dropping the parts as Nico was getting them to me. So I had the shoulder here, and I had told him, hey, I need to make Hulk hands because I don't have time to make articulated fingers, so just model everything hollow, and I'm gonna print the fist, and obviously that's not where my hand is, and I started scaling and moving stuff around. You'll notice it later, but I actually messed up on the backpack. I think that's the one file that got messed up in some transfer, or maybe lost in communication with one of Nico's modelers, because it's supposed to be a lot bigger than this. I just messed up and I scaled everything down on the upper body to 80%, because if I had this chest at 100%, well, it's a little big. It was big enough, that would have been a nightmare. So I did everything at about 80%, but I left the legs and shin, the shin feet thing, I left that at 100%, and thank God I did, because if I had scaled that down even 5%, the stilts would have never fit in there. I had no time to really measure the stilts. I just knew I was gonna print the whole leg and shin and start hacking and slashing it to get it to fit, and that's exactly what I did later. It's a nightmare. So I started scaling everything, and that was the plan. I was going to have the chest and upper body sit on my shoulders. I ended up mounting the shoulder part to the chest, so it's one big assembly. I had Hulk hands for the arms. I had a little waist strap system for the, well, waist, and then the legs were, well, we were gonna cross that bridge when we got to it. Also, really cool little thing, if you select a part and hit Control-C, it just auto mirrors the part right over. So then you can go and export that part if you need to, but this is what I was gonna look like, and you know what? Not bad. You'll also notice that there are two helmets here, and if you've seen the movie or pay attention, you'll notice that this is not Megatron post-cog transformation. This is D16. Well, I got a little bit overzealous while waiting for the files from Nico, and I hopped on DO3D and I'm like, oh my God, they have a Megatron helmet. I can start printing that. So that's what I did. And it came out okay. It was a little rough on the top. I had to print it on my K1 Max because it was too big for the Bambus. And while I was working on it, you know what? We'll get to this later. Funny how I realized it, but I printed D16's helmet. Eventually I realized, oh, I need to print Megatron's helmet. So I had to get that to Nico. He modeled it too, and that's the helmet we ended up going with. And you know what? It looked pretty good. The smile's kind of funny, but that's the reference image I got, and that's the reference image he ended up modeling with. So this was Megatron, but now we needed to get it to fit on the Bambu printers, and these are some big parts. All right, we have the scaling figured out. Now we need to start printing this stuff. And if you look at Orca Slicer here, this is the chest at 80%. This is the size I needed to print it at, and yes, that's the build plate on the X1 and P1S and every Bambu. I was going to need to do a little bit of cutting. The shoulder, almost. Probably could have just cut it in half. I ended up doing a couple other different things. The arm, well, that was a little bit of a problem too, but that leg though, yikes. Now, Bambu and Orca Slicer have their own cut feature. You can click it right here and rotate it and do whatever you want. I'm not the biggest fan of it because it's just manipulating and doing a bunch of stuff. I wasn't using Orca to cut up everything. I wanted to cut these parts up so I could also include some color. Like down here on the chest part, these little vents are supposed to be red, and then the shoulder, this whole center part is like a darker gunmetal. So I couldn't print these in specific pieces with hacking and slashing. I needed to get a little creative. So I went into Mesh Mixer actually, because the biggest thing I like about Mesh Mixer is if you drop in a file and hit generate face groups, it gives you the actual face groups and makes the model a little bit easier to, I don't know, see. And this allows me to do a couple things. This allows me to better visualize where I want to make the cuts, where I can hide those cuts so you can't tell that it's all printed in multiple pieces. So you have the little chest part here and the little center gem, and then I was able to cut parts of the shoulder off right here. This way, when I glued them back together, it was along natural cut lines. Now, this didn't apply to of every part. There were a lot of big smooth surfaces, especially on the shoulders and legs. But for the chest, I was able to hide nearly every single cut I made in detail lines. The other thing is when you actually go into this program and cut things, like I can go here and rotate this cut and make a slash right down the center. If I just select slice, keep both, it makes the cut. The cut is there, but none of the parts move. So this way I can actually go through, make all of my cuts, cut parts out, and then I can hit separate shells, and then it breaks the model apart. So now I can go through and pick and select, oh, I want to save this part, and if this is the one that's highlighted, I can export just that part. So that's exactly what I did. I went out and cut the center part, I cut the little chest bits up here, I think I made a cutout around here, and I just started hacking and slashing this thing up so it made the most sense and fit on the build plate. And for the shoulder piece here, like I said, this entire center part is supposed to be gunmetal or dark black or whatever, and everything else is silver. And then you have the little bits here. Now, these are all problems that could have been alleviated if Nico's modeling team had more time. They could have gone in here and modeled it so this was a separate part. But unfortunately, due to the time constraint, they were only able to break it up into a couple pieces. And again, it's nobody's fault. The fact that they were able to get this done in that time frame was amazing. So I went through and made cuts and cut everything out how I wanted and planned the colors and just how did I want this thing to look. And guys, when dealing with a project this big and this quick, organization is key. So this is a little peek behind how I organized things for this project. I had all the files slotted, head, chest, back, shoulder, forearm, whatever. So in case of the chest, I have the full chest, the upper and bottom, but the file was actually cut into two separate pieces. So I had the chest top and the chest bottom, and then I was slashing it and cutting it up to fit. So right here, I had the entire upper chest cut up. I cut out the little center bit right here along those detail lines, and I cut the left and right sides, and then the little shoulder pieces. So this whole chest, I could actually print it in 5 pieces, and all the parts fit my Bambus. This was perfect. And I'll tell you what, the workflow that Orca or Bambu let me do by having the multiple build plates, seeing where all the parts could be, saving each individual thing. So I saved the cod and butt piece as one file, and then I saved the chest as a whole other file. This way, I could just go back in and I didn't need to re-slice or adjust anything. I could lay everything out, see how it needed to be printed, and then start sending it over to my printer. Some things did get lost and deleted, but like this is exactly what the cod butt plate looked like, and this is all the parts I needed for it. And I did it with every single file I actually printed. And boy, I will tell you guys what, there are so many pieces to the feet and the shins. I had to do a lot of creative cutting for this, and some of the detail lines, you'll see them, it was unavoidable. Now, the other thing to consider when dealing with something like this is the strength of the parts. Yeah, I kind of probably wouldn't recommend to people 3D printing a 7.5 foot, nearly 8 foot costume. It weighed a lot, but we'll get to that later. I needed to keep the weight down as much as possible, but silks can be a little brittle sometimes. So I had to play with the infill and the wall count. Increasing your walls on printing increases the strength so much. So depending on the part I was using anywhere from 3 to 5 walls. If I knew it needed to be a really strong part, like parts around the shoulders, that I was doing 5 walls for and nearly 0% infill, or like 1 to 2% infill. Infill doesn't do too much. Just playing with your wall count will save you so much time and strength. So on average, like I said, I was running 3 to 5 walls. I was doing a high quality because I wanted the printers to do the work. If it was gonna be a one and done, simple, let the machine put out the best quality possible, and then I can just put it all together. So between my P1Ss and X1s, these are pretty much the quality settings I was using. Anywhere from 3 to 4 walls, gyroid, and 1 to 5% infill. I didn't go above 5% infill on a single part. You can see here with this many walls, there isn't really much need for that much infill. This is 5%, and honestly, I think at the end of the day, you could cut this down to probably 1%, and it really wouldn't make that much of a difference. This is a pretty basic geometrically shaped part that doesn't need to be that strong. It's not structural, it's just detail. So keeping this as light as possible was crucial. Now, before I start showing you more of the pieces, the other thing I want to stress is the orientation you are printing at. If you're going to be printing something in raw silk filaments or whatever, the angle and the direction you print stuff in matters. Take this thigh piece, for example. Everything shines the exact same way. Yes, you can see that cut line. That's very obvious, but everything reflects in the exact same direction because when I cut through this, I printed this top part like this and this bottom part like that. So these are the two mating surfaces and all the layer lines go in the exact same direction. So it's not as jarring when you look at it. Unfortunately, hindsight's 2020, and I made this mistake on a couple parts. When looking at the forearm, there are a couple parts that really stand out because the grain and the direction of the layer lines just doesn't quite line up, especially like right here. Though at a distance, not bad, but you can see the reflectivity differences on the part itself because I just didn't print them in the right direction. I wasn't thinking about every part. Honestly, I just got lucky with the thighs and the way I cut it, but parts like the forearm where I had to hack and slash all this, you can definitely see that the layer lines are just in different directions. Is it as bad? No, honestly, I still think it looks pretty good and it got the job done. And this is what I was talking about, printing things in different colors. I printed this in that gunmetal. I printed the fist. I actually printed the fist in 2 different colors and just decided to swap it out. But we're gonna get to the build later on how I got all this together. Or I guess we can just do some really cool time lapses of all the printing, because man, if that's one good thing about the Bambus, they do time lapses pretty well. So yeah, I guess let's get all of this printed and we'll get to the assembly. So here's the print room. I do apologize for any background noise. The lav mic shouldn't be picking up the printers too bad, but I have orders running for Etsy and this is it. These are the machines I use, my 4X1s and my 4P1Ss. Look, like the plastic is still on them. I've been waiting to do this for weeks. Oh. Whew. So before I had even printed the shins and the feet, I had printed over 100 parts for this costume. And out of all of those, all my printers running nonstop round the clock for like 2 weeks, I had like 3 print failures. This, I don't really know what happened here. I think one of the fingers fell over, and then this isn't the part that failed, but it's twin part that was printing at the same time. The corner lifted, and then there were 2 little shoulder pieces that failed, but I actually ended up using them to extend the shoulders, and I can show you on the model later if I remember. But that's incredible. I like my K1s, I like my Prussias, but none of them could have done this. I will take that to my grave. The fact that I only had a couple failed parts after printing 76 pounds worth of plastic, yeah. You wanna see how many rolls I used? It's a war zone in here. Oh boy. I don't know how I just picked all those up. There's still 3 on the floor. This is a lot of filament. No, Blue, no, you can't be in here. I'm gonna drop these. Blue, no. I was gonna drop them for the bit, but now there's a husky. Blue, you gotta get out, bud. Go get out. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? How'd I lose a husky? Oh no. It was a lot of filament. No, I'm not. Hey, if everybody needs any spools, hit me up. Quick little funny story. I ordered silver filament on Amazon, the same SKU. I just ordered like 15 rolls of it, but they sent me 2 different styles. I think it was Sunlu, but it actually ended up being slightly different colors. The silver on this spool had more of a blue tint to it, and then this was just pretty standard silver. And while not the end of the world, what it allowed me to do was use that little slight hue in the silver to actually make the parts even more, I don't know, different color separation, I guess you could call it. So I had the gunmetal, I had the blue, black, purple, and then I had 2 different silvers that I was able to play with, which is kind of neat. You might see it on the final model. It's subtle, but it came out pretty cool. Okay, so with printing done, it was time for the assembly, and guys, I was in such a rush. I didn't really film much of the assembly process. I just have the finished parts now, but it's pretty simple to understand when I show you the part, how everything got glued back together. We'll keep it simple and just start with the forearms. I was using a cyanoacrylate 2-part CA glue, super glue stuff, because I couldn't have any residuals on the outside of it. And now I made a mistake or 2 around the suit, but I just started gluing parts back together. I also ordered a lot of EVA foam online, different thicknesses and densities, and that's actually what I was using to hold some of these parts together. I cut and glued in a whole panel to put this entire inner forearm thingy on. I don't know what you want to call it. And then that's what I ended up gluing all of this to. And then hidden inside is a PVC pipe. This way I can just slide my hand in, and then I have Hulk hands. And these worked great. The only reason I put those little, I don't know, covers right there is while I was in the suit, in case I wanted to drop the arms and like give my hands a break, they didn't immediately just fall off, and then I could actually reload and just, you know, it's like rock and sock 'em robots. Yeah. Also, this is about the time I realized I had a little extra time for some adjustments. I started reprinting a couple pieces just by looking at the reference images. I'm like, you know what? The hands do look better in this PLA metal over this purple, but like, hey, that's the color. Look at that. Look how nice this was coming out. This is a beautiful color, and that's what the shins are made out of, but certain parts just look better in this PLA metal. Like reprinting the bottom pieces here. This was quick and simple. Now let's just start from the thighs up because I want to show you the chest last. Now, I've never worn stilts in a costume, but I knew when suiting up, those legs had to go on first. I had to put the stilts on first, but how do I put the stilts on, but then still get the thighs on? Because if I slide the thighs on, it's gonna be a nightmare trying to get my foot in and strapped and buckled up, but then I still needed a way to get the thighs on and off. So I went with a clamshell method. So after assembling the thighs front and back, I just put some elastic straps on the inside right there, and then a little magnet, a little purse clasp magnet, and you guys have seen this before. This way, when I was wearing the thighs, I could then wrap this around my leg like so, and actually go ahead and buckle it in. Now, just imagine I'm on stilts, and then boom. Then I can get the thigh on and grab the strap, and then take the strap and put it right around my shoulders. And now the thigh is being supported by my shoulders. I have some foam around here somewhere that I just tucked under my shoulder because my shoulders were gonna get a lot of weight. But this worked great. I was able to put the thighs on and off, get into the costume, and this was the next part. Again, imagine I'm in the thigh, or in the shins, stilts, those. And then when it was time for them to come off, all I had to do was just reach down here, unbuckle them, and take the shins off. It was actually pretty convenient. I also took a lot of liberty in cutting out parts of the inner thigh. If you guys have seen my Iron Man suit builds, you know why this is important. The last thing I wanted while being stuck in a 7.5 foot costume, completely encased in armor, you get the idea. So I cut a lot out for comfort. Next up was the cod waist piece. Now initially, I planned on doing this, just sliding into it and pulling it up my waist, and then it sits there, and then I had some buckles and straps to hold it to the chest. However, again, I'm already in the stilts, so I had to make sure that I could do this. Yeah. I'm able to take it on and off. Now, you'll notice there's some parts missing on the inside of this. On the original model, there was a whole other frame inside of this part. These are actually the pieces to it that I ended up ripping out because A, it reduced the weight, and B, it made it easier to get on and off. Also, when I was gluing it together, I put super glue, cyanoacrylate, on the wrong section and glued it, so I had to go and reprint this part. That was my bad. But I also lined the entire inside of this with sound deadening foam. This way, as it slid down and touched the thighs, it didn't make noise, it didn't rub, and it actually just kind of sat there real nicely. And then you can see there's a bunch of buckles and straps right here to hold it up. Now I guess this is the biggest part and the hardest part to explain aside from the shins, the chest. Ooh. Is really big. I glued everything together and then first realized I couldn't get my arms through the armholes, so I ended up just cutting out this section right here. It's actually this part right here. I just got rid of it. And then remember those failed prints I talked about earlier? This little part right here, this is actually the failed print of this part, and I used it to extend this shoulder piece. This way the backpack sits farther back and it was easier to put on and off. And there is a buttload of foam all built up inside the shoulders here because it just sits on my shoulders. And then putting it on is actually pretty simple. Ooh. Sorry, headphone users. Whew. That's it. It just sits there. And honestly, the weight distribution's really good. It doesn't really feel like I'm wearing much. And you can see there are some strap dangly things here. This is what holds the little waist piece up. And then you can see in this photo, I actually have, it's a workout band, sweatband thing turned inside out to cover the straps and kind of blend everything together. Now, obviously, you can see my arms here. That's not news to anybody, but I was wearing a black morph suit or black spandex, so it really didn't stand out, wasn't as jarring. But I think the proportions worked out pretty good, especially that angle. Look at that. That was great. Now, if I had been given more time and I could have over-engineered this thing, I definitely wanted these bicep shoulders to move. The other plan was to use some pipe or like corrugated pipe or drainage pipe to actually have the forearms connected to the biceps and just dangling down. And then I could just slide my arms in and puppeteer them and then take my arms out and they would just hang there. But again, I just didn't have time for it. So this worked really nicely. The shoulders are actually held on with filament rolls, extra filament rolls that I stuffed in there and then printed out a little cover for. And I think it worked out. Pretty nicely. I look goofy. All right, guys, this is the most complicated part to talk about. The stilts and the thighs, or the shins, feet. This was a nightmare. This almost broke me. It was crunch time and I had to figure out how to do this. Yes, I should have made this in foam. At least these. Does anybody want to take a guess on, with the stilt, there's a stilt in there, a boot I can slip my foot into, and a solid plastic 3D printed leg. How much do you guys think this weighs? Leave your comments down below. I'll tell you at the end after I explain it all. Now, I can't take the stilts out anymore. They are super glued and foam glued and hot glued and taped in there. They're permanent now. If I want to get them out, I have to destroy the leg. Destroy it! And initially, I was really hoping for the stilts to be as low as possible. Their lowest setting of, I believe, 12 inches. But once I started to get them in there, the leg isn't touching the ground. Only the bottom of the stilt is. The foot actually floats a little bit above it because this is pretty brittle plastic. I had to print it as light as possible because I couldn't risk stuff breaking. So I hollowed everything out. I used Mesh Mixer to cut out the entire bottom of the stilt, even though they did a great job modeling it. And I just started hacking and slashing at it. And I took out a lot of material even after it was printed. You can see the stilt all in there, just shoved down in there. And fun fact, this little cap right here is actually the front of my foot. Because of how big the boot and the stilt was, there was just nowhere to put my foot and it was squishing my toes. So I actually ended up printing another cap. This is part of the forearm, and just, you can actually see the boot, maybe you can see it. You can't see it, there it is. You can see the front of the boot. The boot's still in there. And then I actually cut out the back of this plate right here and this whole part because that's the back of the stilt too. Luckily, everything fit. If I had scaled this down at all, this would have been so much worse. Everything just barely fit, and the only compromise I had to make was that little cap on the front that nobody even noticed. And I have an actual work boot strapped down there. This way I can just slide my foot into it, cinch it up, and I'm good to go. Whoever modeled this on Nico's team killed it. This toe moves. There was actually a joint here. The whole ankle, the whole big cap right here, that's a joint. It was meant to move, but I can't put the rod through it because there's a stilt in the way. And then this back little ankle part right back here, that was supposed to move too. I had to cut it all up and glue it together. But like, this was meant to be a whole foot that moved. I probably could have engineered it and cut it and printed it to work a little bit better, but again, time crunch. So it's all glued together. I used the caps to fit everything, and you can see a lot of the cut lines. And you'll also notice that the top of the shin right here, this is shiny and this isn't. That's because one was printed on the X1 and one was printed on the P1S. Same filament, same settings, but the finish quality actually came out drastically different. Now, at a distance, honestly, it looks pretty cool. It's nice and shiny. It's Megatron's leg. I like it. Now I'm gonna do something I haven't done since the premiere. I'm gonna put these on real quick and then I'll tell you how much they both weigh. Also, guys, I got pretty good at walking at stilts pretty fast. Now these aren't fully tightened up. I kind of have to hunch down here, but I hope this makes sense on why I needed to have the thighs separate, because getting in there to cinch them up and strap them, that's been a nightmare. I have foam that I put in there to help cushion and pad it. Everything's kind of loose and wobbly right now, but this is it. The stilts came out to like 15 or 16 inches. And if you take a guess on how much they weigh, if you guessed 22 pounds total, you were right. Now that's including the boot, the stilt, and all of the plastic. But I have 22-pound weights strapped to my feet. It was a really good thigh workout. And unfortunately, because of the time it was printed in, the brittleness of the silk, and me not being able to R&D it, parts did end up breaking off. This whole inner part right here, this is pretty much just destroyed. But I knew things like that were gonna happen. I knew the silk might fail in certain places, so I lined the entire inside of the shin with duct tape. This way, if parts broke, they didn't actually fall off, because that's kind of embarrassing. And it definitely helped keep some of the structural integrity. Now, I'm gonna get these off, and then we'll talk about how much the entire suit weighed and wrap this up. Whee! This still feels cool. Yeah, this was cool. Ah! Yeah, okay. This box right here, this is all the parts I cut out. Parts on the thighs and the shins and the feet that I actually had to go and remove, like the giant ankle locks. I had to cut those out so the stilts would fit. This is that pipe that's supposed to articulate the leg that fits through there. I obviously couldn't use that. So there's a lot of scrap parts in here and weight I had to get rid of that just made the whole thing easier. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it. Okay, before we get into the final weight of everything and things I would do a little differently, real quick, I want to talk about the helmet. Luckily, Megatron only had one thing of electronics, his eyes. And I just needed super bright red LED eyes, and the cosplay LED eyes I use for like my Iron Man helmets here, they weren't enough. Especially in daylight, you can't see red. Red is the hardest color to project during the daytime. So I hopped on Amazon and I bought these really cheap red LED tactical flashlights. They were like $8 or $9 each, and I ended up disassembling them and ripping all the guts out of them. My plan was to have the LED flashlight next to my eye, so it's pointing this way, my eyeball's here, and I can still see forward. And that's exactly what ended up happening. I can put this helmet on and look forward, and I can see the camera perfectly. Hopefully you guys can still hear me because of the lav mic. My eye is right here next to it, and I can look directly past the LED, and it doesn't even shine back at me. It was just a matter of gutting the flashlight, gluing it into place, aiming it forward, and then just having some batteries connected to it to power it. I also threw a butt ton of duct tape and electrical tape around the eyes because there was still some red shining back at me just from reflecting off of the silver, but taping and masking around it worked wonders. I just used some pretty simple LED batteries to power it with little connectors, little JST connectors. Guys, let me know if you want me to do a full build tutorial on this helmet, and I can go over more in detail about the eyes, the wiring system, how I dimmed them down. This is 3 degrees dimmed down. What I mean by that is there's 3 pieces of translucent Scotch tape over the LEDs, and they are still this bright. They're lethal without that like dimming feature. And in the back, I added some cooling fans. I actually have air being inducted into the helmet, but that's a whole other mess to get into. So if you guys want a full overview of this helmet and build, please let me know down below. I'd love to talk about it. I'd love to reprint it and just make this thing cooler and better. But there's some Noctuo fans, the same fans that are on your 3D printer to make it quiet. There's 2 of them in here, just pumping in air, and then I have a USB battery pack. It helped a lot. It wasn't the best thing in the world, but it kept some airflow through my head. This way I wasn't dying and sweating and having to take the helmet off constantly, because an Iron Man helmet opens, this didn't. So the final weight of the entire costume, the head was 1,082 grams, or a roll and a half, or over 1 roll of filament. The chest was 7,300 grams. Each arm was 1,572 grams. The waist was 1,848 grams. Each thigh was 1,586 grams. And each leg was 9,092 grams. That comes to a grand total of 34,730 grams of filament, or about 35 kilograms of filament. That is 76 pounds. That entire suit, while I was wearing it, weighed 76 pounds. And that's including the stilts, obviously, and the boots and the buckles and straps and electronics, but wow. Now, I didn't feel the 22 pounds in the legs when I'm wearing it and standing there because I'm not moving them around. If I'm just standing on the stilts, that's 22 pounds each. That's 44 pounds. I'm not actively moving around. What was nice about the thighs is when I wasn't walking, they actually slid down enough where they would rest on the top of the shin. And this way my shoulders weren't feeling the thigh weight and the whole shoulder chest weight. So I was really just carrying around the chest and the shoulders on my shoulders. And then I was using the Hulk hands, and then I had the helmet on. So it really wasn't as heavy as you might think. If I had just 76 pounds on my shoulders, I would not have been able to do that for the premiere, but it still wasn't that bad. It was definitely a thigh workout, but we got through it. We were only suited up for like 2 hours, but it looked really, really cool, and I'm glad I did it. All right, this video's been long enough. Let's start wrapping this up. In hindsight, yeah, this was kind of a bad idea to just raw 3D print. Obviously, I incorporated some foam in there. There's things I could have done differently. I need to learn to use foam because I should have done those shins and feet out of foam from the get-go. Lifting up Kiara's legs like in her costume and feeling how light her entire suit was, without her stilts, her entire suit weighed as much as one of my legs. EVA foam is ridiculous, but I didn't have time to learn a new craft and get it done, so I printed them. And honestly, it would make a pretty cool statue if I print some extra little bits and connect them together, but I think I'm gonna actually think I'm gonna actually sell this costume to somebody because I don't have room for it. Because it was so big, I couldn't fit it in suitcases and actually ship it like to LA. So I'm glad the premiere got moved to New York. This way I was able to rent a car and just drive up, because you saw how big those legs are. Oh my God, the oversized baggage that would have required, and God forbid something breaks in the airport or in shipment or on the plane, or what if one of the cases doesn't arrive? So driving up was definitely the move, but I'll probably talk about that in a live stream or on Discord or something, get more into details about this and answer the questions I didn't answer here. Make sure you guys are subscribed to catch that live stream if I do one. Hang out with me on Discord or whatever, and I can do a video about the helmet. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, and I'm sure a lot of you have questions, please leave some comments down below. I read all of them, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as possible. It's hot in here. You guys hot? Oh my God. I have a printer running right here. Of course it's warm. But that is my D16 Megatron build. I hope I answered a lot of your questions, guys. I'm really proud of how it came out. Prepping for everything, I really only had 25 days of work time for this thing, because I had to get it ready to then drive up to New York. So the 45 days quickly dwindled down to about 25, and then I had other stuff going on. So the fact that I was able to get this done, I'm very proud of myself in doing this. I think it shot really well, and everybody who was there at the premiere seemed pretty happy with it, and I'm just happy with the results. So I think that's gonna do it for this video, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. You have a good day. Really? Now you're gonna start making noise while I'm doing my outro? You're so rude. You AMS knockoff. Actually, it's kind of better than the AMS. Shh, don't worry about it. You're fine.